Hey everybody, I'm Melissa Cryan. I'm the Grant Program Supervisor at the Division of Conservation Services, which is within the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs with the Commonwealth. Because it's the government, we have to have as many words as possible. And I'm here today with my coworker, Vanessa, who I will let introduce herself.
Hi, Vanessa Farny. Land and Forest Program Manager with DCS. So I administer 4 of the grant programs that we're going to review here today. I joined DCS in December, but have been working in land conservation for coming up on about 15 years. So in different capacities, but appreciate all the hard work that goes into these projects. And pleased to be here to support the work you're doing.
Great, thanks, Vanessa. And we will be running through all of the different grant programs that we administer at the division, as well as talking about the ways that we have included diversity, equity, and inclusion in the work that we're doing. And that includes the other grant programs that Vanessa does not administer, the ones that I administer, as well as the open space and recreation plans that I review as a part of my responsibilities within the division. And as Mariah already mentioned, we're going to have plenty of time at the end of the session for questions. So we'll just ask that you if you could hold your questions until the end, and that includes the chat. I just would request that if we could keep the chatting within the chat until the end of the presentation, I'd really appreciate it. This may be just me, and maybe I'm too easily distracted, but when I'm presenting, I find it a little distracting if I find things popping up in the chat below. So thank you for being patient with my request there, but never fear, we will have time to answer the questions. And with that, I'm going to start sharing my screen and the presentation. And hopefully, can everybody see that now? Great. And so first, very exciting news that we are happy to announce the fiscal year 23 grant round. So our land and park grants are currently posted, and that has a deadline of Thursday, July 14th at 3 p.m. And Vanessa and I will be hosting 2 grant workshops, which are listed right there. And again, as Mariah mentioned, we will be sharing this PowerPoint later through the conference portal. So don't feel like you need to scribble madly all of the things that you're reading here. And the Conservation Partnership Grant for FY23 will be posted. However, right now we actually have a second round for FY22, which is still live and is due next week. So that is still what you would find on the Conservation Partnership Grant website. And we still have 2 existing previously posted grants, the Landscape Partnership, as well as the Small Communities Grant, which we will be speaking of later in this presentation. And with that, we'll be moving on to the heart of the program and why I think you probably all came today. So, just getting started, I'm not sure what everyone's familiarity is with the definition of environmental justice. So I thought I would get us all on the same playing field to give you what we at EEA, that is the acronym for Energy and Environmental Affairs, consider to be environmental justice, or EJ. EJ is based on the idea that everyone has the right to be protected from environmental pollution and to live in somewhere that is clean and shares a healthful environment. EJ is also the equal protection and meaningful involvement of people with respect to the development and enforcement of environmental laws and regulations, as well as policies, and the equitable distribution of environmental benefits. The office established the EEA policy to help address the disproportionate environmental burdens that were being experienced by lower income people as well as communities of color, and to give them their fair share of environmental assets as well. So the history of environmental justice at EEA goes back to 2002 when Secretary Durand at the time signed the first EJ policy, which at the time we were known as just EOEA, just Environmental Affairs. And at the time that policy was only for EOEA's agencies. Then in 2014, Governor Patrick signed an EJ policy that applied to all secretariats, regardless, not just environmental affairs, but all of the state's agencies. In 2017, EEA's Secretary Matt Beaton at the time, he signed the updated EEA EJ policy. And currently, EEA has an environmental justice director, Rishi Reddy, that is around to help implement the policy. But what is the definition, the technical definition of EJ? In Massachusetts, a neighborhood is defined as an EJ population if one or more of the following 4 criteria are true. A median household income is at or below 65% of the statewide median. 40% of the residents are minority. 25% of the residents are lacking English language proficiency, or minorities comprise 25% or more of the population, and the annual median household income of the municipality in which the neighborhood is located does not exceed 150% of the statewide annual median household income. And I should say that a neighborhood is based on census tracts. So when it comes specifically to our grant programs, how have we been incorporating environmental justice since the beginning? Well, from the outset of the EJ policy, so going back to 2002, the staff were active members of, at the time, there were EJ outreach teams that were set up throughout the Commonwealth. The Urban Self-Help Program, which is now called the Park Grant Program. The Urban Self-Help regulations were amended to incorporate EJ into the award scoring system. And urban self-help fact sheets were distributed in multiple languages for distribution in EJ neighborhoods. And since then, EJ is a rating consideration in most of our grant programs, which we will be going through throughout this program, and you can see specifically what we do. So I have here a couple of different websites that would be useful, hopefully, in your work going forward. The EJ Data Viewer that incorporates all of the data from the 2020 census, as well as just the straight up the environmental justice website. And there you can find a list of cities and towns that have EJ populations. You can learn about the data that went into making up that 2020 EJ GIS data layer. And then also the languages spoken map that Vanessa and I just learned about last week. That's really cool. That shows census tracts as to where at least 5% of the population has speakers that self-identify as do not speak English very well. And over the next couple of slides, I'm just going to show you a couple of screenshots of these data viewers that you can take a look at. So this, I just did a screenshot of most of the state. Apologies to the Cape, it didn't get on my screen. But I just wanted to share this because I think a lot of people have a misperception that EJ is something that is only a term that applies to our cities. And I think by seeing this, while you can't probably see specifically down into your specific neighborhood, but you can see that we have many of our communities that have highlighted colors where there are EJ populations to be found. So I would specifically maybe call your attention to some of our more rural communities out in the Berkshires where maybe you would not be expecting to see, say, Monroe or Rowe or Charlemont to have to find populations out in that neck of the woods. So just something to think about. And here's this languages spoken map. And so this, I typed in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is about a mile down the road from where I am right now. And just because this is a community that has so many different languages spoken. And so I clicked on this track 2501 in Lawrence, where you can see that where Spanish or Spanish Creole is spoken by 45.1% of the population. But I think that this would be a big help to people who are looking to do outreach in other languages and trying to get a sense as to which languages are spoken in that specific neighborhood. And I should also note that you don't need to type in just a community. You can type in a specific address as well and figure out which languages are spoken in that census tract. So hopefully you'll find these resources useful for your work going forward. So we also think about EJ when it comes to open space and recreation plans. We ask that you do enhanced outreach in any EJ neighborhoods that you have in your community. That can vary based on why you're, what criterion is considered to be EJ in your community. And if you want to hear more about that in the question and answer section, I'm more than willing to talk about that. And in the population characteristics section, if you have any EJ populations, we would like you to discuss them. We want you to include an EJ map. Again, this is only if you have EJ populations in your communities. And for the environmental challenges section, we do ask that everyone, this is regardless of if you have EJ populations in your communities or not, that you include an environmental equity section. So this is different than EJ in that in this section, the environmental equity section, we're looking for you to look at the distribution of open space and recreation resources in your entire community and identifying any areas that are lacking in them. So that should become an action item in your plan if it becomes apparent that there is a particular section of your city or town that is lacking in any particular type of resource. And with that, I'm going to kick off talking about our specific grant programs. And just a warning that this is very, very much a 35,000-foot view of all of our grants. So I apologize if this seems like you are getting super overwhelmed with all of the information that Vanessa and I are about to share about all of our programs. But I do urge you that if you are interested in learning more about any of the grant programs that we mentioned, that Vanessa and I, as I mentioned before, will be hosting 2 grant workshops on the land and park grants specifically. And that if you have any more detailed questions about any of the other programs, either ask us during the question and answer section today, or jot down our email or phone numbers, and we're happy to talk in more detail later. So moving on, the Conservation Partnership Program, eligible entities to apply for this are any 501c3 nonprofits with an environmental, conservation, or recreation focus. So this is kind of the target of this conference, the land trust community. Eligible projects are land acquisition for conservation or recreation. We can also help reimburse due diligence costs associated with gifts, and we can help acquire land and fee or conservation restrictions as well. And any of the photos that you see here today are ones that receive funding. So yes, this was not a bad day when I unfortunately did not get to go out to Muskegon Island, but a former coworker did. So the priorities of the secretary, you will see in the grant rating system, all of our grants in the application package, it includes the rating system. So you can specifically see what your grant application would be rated on. The things that Secretary Thea Herides is looking for this year include giving more points for land trusts with either no paid staff or a small paid staff, landscape protection, which means acquiring more acres versus less, anything that is considered to be resilient for climate change, so a land that maps well according to the Nature Conservancy's resiliency mapping, as well as land that does well according to the biomap layers. And those parcels also that are going to provide many different types of recreational amenities. And this, I have to point out, given that I live in Andover, this parcel's not too far from me. So when it comes to DEI and conservation partnership, we're looking for the type of public recreational opportunities that will be available in our rating system, especially those that go above and beyond to provide access to people with disabilities. So this means not just satisfying the Americans with Disabilities Act, but really thinking, how can people with disabilities access the site? We also are looking to see that the Land Trust has a commitment to working with Native American tribes, and that the project is located in or near an environmental justice population, and that hopefully they have been actively involved in the project. And also we are looking for projects that are located in a census tract that does not already have a large amount of open space that is protected. The next grant program that we're going to be talking about today is the Land and Water Conservation Fund. I told you we were going to be jumping right through all these grants. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is a federal program that we administer at DCS on behalf of the National Park Service. And this grant can fund recreation, conservation, and trail projects. I'm not sure if I mentioned this later in a slide, so I will say the eligible entities for this grant are municipalities with an up-to-date open space and recreation plan, as well as the departments of conservation and recreation, as well as fish and game. When it comes to DEI and the land and water rating system, we're looking for if the project is located in an environmental justice community, as well as if it's expanding the number of recreational opportunities available to residents. And again, similar to the Conservation Partnership Grant, we're looking to make sure that this site is giving people with disabilities access and not just meeting the bare minimum of going ahead and meeting the ADA requirements. The last grant that I will be talking about today is the Park Grant Program. And this is a municipal grant program where the cities and towns that are eligible for the grant must have an up-to-date open space and recreation plan on file with us by the grant deadline. You can buy land that will become a park. You can build a new park, or you can renovate an existing park with the Park Grant Program. The maximum grant award is $400,000, and the reimbursement rate for this grant is 52 to 70% of the total project cost up to that $400,000 maximum grant award. And the reimbursement rate is based on demographic factors, with the more wealthy communities being reimbursed less than the not as wealthy communities in the state. The reimbursement rates are posted on both the park and the land grant websites, if you're curious. Secretary's priorities for the grant this year are parks that go above and beyond to provide access to people with disabilities. We want to see new parks that increase the community's park equity, especially locating parks in environmental justice neighborhoods. Parks that have incorporated climate resiliency ideas in their design, and projects that have planned for future stewardship of the site. And how the park grant incorporates DEI in its ratings. We are, by our regulations, have to incorporate demographics in the ratings, and we include median income and poverty level in our rating system. The community profile score gives points for if this is an EJ community, as well as whether or not an EJ community has decided to site the project within a mapped EJ census tract. Again, we're also looking to see how well the amenities will be for people with disabilities, and that we also are looking to see that the community has done enhanced outreach in environmental justice neighborhoods to be certain that the project selection and design was done by residents of these populations, these neighborhoods, and not just by the city or town, the town employees, the city employees themselves. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa to talk about the remainder of our grant programs.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. So for those who joined us a little later in the presentation, I'm the Land and Forest Program Manager with DCS. I joined in December, and I administer 4 of the grant programs, which I will walk you through here today. The first of which is the Land Grant Program. As Melissa mentioned at the beginning, this and the Park Grant Program are currently open for applications. We can address questions at the end. This is referred to as the Land Grant Program. It's an acronym for Land Acquisition and Natural Diversity. And that is really the focus of this grant program. So this is a grant program for municipalities acting through the Conservation Commission or agricultural commissions to acquire land or conservation restrictions for resource conservation and passive recreation. So these are recreational activities along the lines of hiking and bird watching, activities that are compatible with resource values on the property. Maximum grant is $400,000. And this reflects a reimbursement rate that varies based upon the municipality. So if you have a project with a total cost of $850,000 in, say, Bedford, which is reimbursed at 54% of project costs, the grant award would be for a maximum of $459,000. And as Melissa mentioned, for some of the other grants, applicants must have a current open space and recreation plan for this. So next, just moving into the Secretary's priorities. This grant is intended to support larger land conservation projects that protect resource values, that potentially include working landscapes such as farmland, as pictured here. And the grant really is intended to protect resilient landscapes. Considering climate change, we want to ensure that we're protecting landscapes that will support natural resources of Massachusetts in the future. And we're also considering how the properties will continue to facilitate public access and enjoyment. And then lastly, one of the important considerations is whether applicants have planned for the property stewardship. In terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, those are built into the evaluation. The grant review ratings account for median income, EJ designations, proximity and availability of open space. And there are also additional points awarded for projects that provide recreational access to people with disabilities. And we do encourage applicants to articulate outreach to EJ designated neighborhoods. This next grant, the Drinking Water Supply Protection Grant Program. This is a grant program that just closed. As the name implies, it is intended to protect sources of drinking water. So municipalities are eligible to apply, as well as water suppliers or other agencies or entities such as water districts, in some cases fire districts. And as I mentioned, this grant is again focused on protecting land through fee or conservation restriction acquisition, specifically for drinking water protection. So the grant gives consideration to infiltration rates for groundwater recharge, to EP drinking water categorizations, and distance from wellheads, among others. And I touched on most of the Secretary's priorities. This is a grant focused on facilitating conservation of larger tracts of land for broader conservation benefits, as well as specifically focused on the protection of drinking water supply. And of course, grant application rankings do consider whether the project area serves EJ designated communities. So this next third grant here is the Landscape Partnership Grant Program. This is one of the more complex grant programs that DCS administers. As the name implies, it is focused on landscape scale projects and supporting strong conservation partnerships. So the minimum project size is 500 acres. This is Massachusetts, So we acknowledge that this could be a single contiguous 500-acre area, which is somewhat rare, or alternatively, several parcels of land are part of a matrix of protected lands. So which are essentially contiguous or connected through existing protected land. We also give consideration to parcels that may be divided by a road, but connected via wildlife crossings. So protection of parcels that still facilitate the movement of species. And to be eligible, the grant application must reflect the participation of a minimum of 2 partners. And this could be a municipality, a land trust, or a state or federal agency. It can certainly involve more than 2 partners, and oftentimes does, but it must, at a minimum, involve 2 partners from at least 2 categories. And then, provided the scale of these projects, we do fund multi-year projects. And then, provided this grant program is really designed to facilitate the protection of large parcels of land, this takes place in oftentimes less developed landscapes. So unfortunately, it does not have sort of a strong DEI component. But we certainly welcome thoughts on that. And then the last grant I will touch on, and I realize we are moving through these quite rapidly, but I imagine that many of you have a specific grant program you came here with questions on, so we will get to those as I wrap this up. This is almost on the other end of the spectrum here, the smaller end of the spectrum. Conservation Assistance for Small Communities grant is, as the name implies, for communities with not more than 6,000 residents. So the idea is to provide financial support for the development of open space and recreation plans. Melissa mentioned that those are critical for the municipality's eligibility for a variety of other grant programs. There's also financial support for the development of other land conservation plans, or for the cost of appraisals, which are often required of land acquisitions, and particularly for grant applications. So this grant reimburses at 80% of project cost. And if you are applying for open space and recreation planning assistance, it does require that you identify in your application which of the other grants that we've covered here today your community intends to pursue. So though the grant application is required for reimbursement, it is not contingent upon the success of that grant. So that's important to understand. And I think our final slide here, because we moved through so many different grant programs so quickly here, we want to make sure to direct you to the DCS grant programs website. And you have here an abbreviated list of the grants that we've covered, and you can find more information on each of these grants on that website. So I'm going to pause there and turn it over to Melissa. I'll give Melissa the opportunity to identify if I missed anything here in the presentation and chime in if she has further insights on any of these grants. Otherwise, I think we will open it up to questions.
No, and I apologize that for whatever reason, the advancing the slides became more difficult when you took over. So I apologize for the jumping ahead. Yeah, I'll just remind everyone that if you are not muted yourself, please mute yourself, because we were getting a little bit of background noise from somebody, but I think that's a little better now. But now what I would love to do is I'm going to leave this up for one more second for just a reminder. We will be sharing this PowerPoint later through the conference's website, but I'm going to leave that in case people are just so excited about writing this website down. But also the best way that sometimes I find to find the information is just to Google the different grant programs. Even that's how I find stuff on our own website. Okay, great. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I think with that, given the number of people in the room, maybe we can probably, Mariah, if it's okay with you, just have people raise their hand if they have a question, and we can just have people verbally ask the questions.
Sounds like a great plan.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll kick off with a question for the crowd, and you can raise your hand or yell out or whatever, but has anybody in this room ever been involved with writing an open space and recreation plan for your community? No, so I get a whole bunch of fresh people in the room. Yes, not yet, Megan. Hopefully this has inspired you to want to do something then. Has anybody been involved with any of our grant programs in the past? Yes, Amy, you have been. Looks like you're nodding your head.
Sorry, yes, I'm muted. Yes, in the past I have, and I'm new at the NRC and hopefully will be soon as well.
That's great to hear that. Now that I've gotten the ball rolling, maybe this has jogged some questions from the group.
Hi, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I should really know that by now.
Yeah, but
I have a question.
Just yell out. Good.
Yeah, I was wondering if either of you have examples of projects you've funded that involve partnerships with Native American tribes. If you could, review those.
What with Native American tribes?
If you have examples of projects you've funded with your grants that involve partnerships.
Okay, I'm so sorry. It was like that word kind of got fuzzy.
No problem.
I just want to I figured that's what you were asking, but I wanted to make sure I was actually answering the right question. We have not done as many projects as I would like. There is a project right now that I feel like if I say definitively that it's happened, I will. It is a project that is supposed to be closing in fiscal year 22 that the Greater Worcester Land Trust is working on right now. That is a very exciting project that, again, I'm not going to say it has definitively happened, but it is the Land Trust submitted on behalf of a tribe because the tribe hadn't yet gotten their 501c3 status. And I've never seen, well, I shouldn't say never. It was one of the most excited letters I had received from Mass Historic. They were so jazzed about it. And I would also say that we've done a couple of projects with East Quabbin Land Trust where Cynthia Henshaw has gotten some good input from the tribes in her area too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Robin, you have your virtual hand raised.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm new director of the Williamstown Land Trust. Oh, excuse me.
Welcome.
Williamstown Rural Lands, Municipal Land Trust. And I'm just wondering if you have, I'm looking at your website and I'm wondering if there's a way to just narrow down what's available to land trusts.
Yep, that is a good question. Yep. So the two grants that are land trusts are eligible for straight up conservation partnership and landscape partnership. However, I would give the big caveat that the land trusts usually work hand in hand with many communities on the land grant program, and as well as the Land and Water Conservation Fund program. And I would say that depending on where you are in the state, especially out in your neck of the woods where you have many small town, population-wise small towns, your communities can probably, they would appreciate a hand in kind of facilitating a grant process. So when it comes to just which programs you yourself could apply to, you would want to look to the conservation partnership. And then again, the landscape partnership with a partner. And those are the two that land trusts are directly eligible for, but we also see partnerships with the land and water programs as well.
Great. And of course,
I'll say drinking water supply protection as well.
Yes.
Is another one where oftentimes land trust will reach out to their water district or municipality about a conservation project that benefits both open space values of the community, but also drinking water protection, and facilitate an application that way.
Yes,
Great.
Thanks, Vanessa. Totally forgot about that. Which I shouldn't, since that's a grant that was just most recently too.
Well, it's fresh on my mind.
So. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to lower my hand by going to reactions, and you can see raised hand. The person who asked that earlier. Thanks.
Yes, that was a good tip for the room. Amy.
Thanks. Yeah. First, thank you for the presentation. And this is sort of similar to the questions that have been asked, but I'm wondering if you have any projects in mind that you think of as being really excellent models for partnership applications, especially with communities of color or Native communities or sort of urban, rural kinds of connections.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's we see great partnerships a lot in more of our urban areas, like Groundwork Lawrence does great work with the city of Lawrence and does a lot. They have just been so active in the community for years that they are a trusted partner with the city as well as the residents. So the Groundwork program facilitates the public process and kind of gets the residents in line for what they do a lot of park projects. And so what are the amenities you're looking for in this particular park, and then the city is the one that applies for the project and the grant, and then the oftentimes Groundwork is the one that helps administer the actual construction of the park when it is being built. So that is something that helps both. Groundwork is able to get their mission and goals implemented on the ground, and then the city, based on staff levels, that they wouldn't be able to get as much work done either if it wasn't for Groundwork. So those are the types of things that I always think about when we're talking about environmental justice populations. Really, that is one of the best models that I have seen. And Vanessa, I know that you have not done too much yet with Greening the Gateways, but I don't know if you have seen a Greening the Gateways project, which of course we did not talk about today, but but maybe would be something that would be another good example.
Yeah, absolutely. So DCS has a program focused on gateway cities in Massachusetts, which for those who are not familiar are designated municipalities, which often have a high percentage of EJ communities. And DCS, in collaboration with DCR, has a variety of grant programs, which I'm involved with, to facilitate tree planting in gateway cities. So we actually do have partnership grants that are specifically intended to help facilitate the work of nonprofit partners, such as Groundwork Lawrence or others, who have demonstrated their strength to be in engaging the community in that tree planting work and communicating the benefits. As DCR is pursuing the getting the trees in the ground piece, it's important to kind of communicate with the community around the benefits of those trees and identify willing landowners who will have trees planted on their property or looking to have trees planted on their property. So that's kind of a specific example. And we are in the midst of developing a new grant program, actually, and we'll be very interested to see what types of applications we receive, geared around facilitating tree planting by municipalities and hopefully in partnership with some of the nonprofit organizations that support that work. So certainly quite a bit of work in the gateway cities where we have found a great opportunity for collaboration. It's sort of drawing on the strengths of both the municipality and the nonprofit partner.
Yeah, Kathy, don't know what, Vanessa, do you have a list of the latest, most up-to-date list of the gateway cities in the Commonwealth?
Oh, I do. It's not off the top of my, I can't recite them all off of the top of my.
No, because there are 20 plus of them, so there are a bunch, and it's by statute too. They're legally defined in law.
Yep.
So my guess is, yeah, if you Google it, you would be able to find that list.
Yeah. So I'm just I will find the website to that work on mass.gov and drop in the chat.
Thank you. Amy, do you still have another question, or is your hand still raised from the, nope, it's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure I'm not ignoring you. And then that's the, great.
I was wondering if you could speak to some of the accessibility aspects of the land, what was it, the Land and Water Conservation Fund program, if you have any examples of increased accessibility.
Yeah, well, my favorite example is one of the pictures in the slideshow, which was in DCR, so the Department of Conservation and Recreation, one of our state agencies that's eligible. They, a number of years ago, got a grant to build a park in Watertown right along the Charles River that is fully accessible for people that go to the Perkins School, which is right across the street. So it's a perfect location for that. And they did a lot of thought as to what makes sense from that perspective, and visitors that can't see, and what amenities that they would be wanting to have in that park. So it's a combination of, well, of course, great location for that, but it also, you need to then have the thought and follow through to then actually design the park with those populations in mind, which not everybody sadly would think to do, but then also have it be built such that if that everybody would find it an interesting park to visit, which they definitely did. And I think that's one of the things I think is great about a lot of parks and then trail development nowadays too, is that when you're considering everyone, it's nice for everybody and not just a small segment of a population, whether it's able-bodied people or another subpopulation of people. And I think that that's particularly important when you're talking about children and playgrounds, that all access playgrounds can be great for kids of all stripes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There, any other questions from the group? Well, if there aren't, oh yeah, Robin, do you have another question? Yeah.
I'm curious, what is the hit rate for, well, I should say, do land trusts comprise a high proportion of your grantees?
Well, depending on the grant, yes. Yeah, and I would definitely say that even when it comes to some of our other grant programs that aren't specifically for land trusts, that you will definitely see a high involvement rate with, say, the land grant, or as Vanessa thankfully reminded me, the drinking water grant, that we will have land trust partnerships. And even I should say too, now that I'm thinking about it, that if you're using Community Preservation Act funding for an acquisition, that requires the conservation restrictions. So thankfully there are many of you out there that are willing to hold the CR on those properties for the municipalities that are funding their acquisitions that way, which is critical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just tag on to that. Not only do we see a good number of nonprofit applications, but I think many of these projects, even when it is a municipality that is the applicant and that is pursuing the project, it's often at the behest of the land trust and that community which has been advocating for that project. And oftentimes there's a component of that project that the land trust is facilitating, like Melissa just touched on, in order to leverage CPA funding, there's a CR requirement, and it's often the land trust that's going to hold that CR. There are land trusts that have done significant fundraising to help provide the match required of some of these grants, so that's another opportunity. And then there's also many of these grants require city council approval or a vote at town meeting. And that's another place where I think land trust support is often really critical to ensuring that the community understands sort of the benefits of the project, and just, again, playing that role of sort of trusted communicator. So.
And Robin, please be in touch, even if you don't have any specific projects in mind, but if Vanessa or I could be of any help as you're getting going, we're happy to help. Well,
I encourage everyone here to think about projects where you might be able to take advantage of these grants. And also just consider Melissa and myself as resources as you consider projects. We are here to help answer questions as you're putting the pieces together. If you want to better understand sort of the timeline involved in these grants, when we anticipate different grant rounds to open. I know from my experience, planning these projects is often a multi-year endeavor. So you may have a landowner you're initiating conversations with, and you want to start thinking about what funding might be available for that individual in their timeline. And that's, I hope the overview today would give you a sense of all the different opportunities here. But as you start to get more creative about those components, feel free to reach out to either of us with questions.